A very good evening to you and welcome to the Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news of the day. I'm Frances Hurd, and this week is budget week, so we'll focus on the special supplementary budget to be delivered by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni on Wednesday. Of course, the budget was first presented in February, like usual, but then everything changed. The COVID-19 pandemic hit and government said it would have to loan additional funds and allocate some spending towards health and some for more social grants as well. Now, remember the 500 billion rand COVID-19 support and rescue package announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Well, this supplementary budget will explain where that money will come from. Now, here are some numbers that are very important. Firstly, let's look at the budget deficit that was expected to be minus 6.8% in February. At a meeting of NEDLAC last Friday, Treasury revealed that the forecasting is now for a budget deficit of more than 14%. So you can see how things have changed. Now, the deficit is the shortfall between revenue and expenditure. So what this means is that less money is coming in than the money that needs to be spent. And the difference has to be raised through borrowing. Cumulatively, over years, these deficits are adding up, and South Africa's overall debt burden is now alarmingly high. So let's move on to the debt to GDP ratio. Now, the debt to GDP ratio was around 62% last year. In February, the finance minister predicted that in 3 years' time, it would rise to 71.6%. Now things have changed. Treasury is talking about the deficit rising to 90.9% in 3 years' time. That means it'll be more than 90% of the entire economy, since GDP is essentially the output of the economy, and thereafter it'll keep climbing, possibly reaching 100% and more. With these sorts of debt levels, it's worried that an economy like South Africa could face default. Last week, the finance minister warned that South Africa faced a sovereign debt crisis over the next 4 years if fundamental changes weren't introduced. So the stakes are very high ahead of this supplementary budget this week. Let's speak now to Dr. Azar Jamminne, Chief Economist at Econometrix. Dr. Azar, great to have you with us as always. When we talk about this supplementary budget, firstly, is this tweaks or really a re-engineering of the entire budget?
I think it's more than tweaks. It's a re-engineering of the entire budget. The government has never faced such a dramatic change in the economic outlook in such a short period of time. And with that, such an incredible change in their expectations of how much tax revenue they're going to get. People are going to be earning less, so paying a lot less tax. Companies are going to be struggling to make any profit, so company tax is going to fall sharply. People are going to be spending so much less because they have less money available, so VAT revenue is going to fall. And people are traveling so much less because of the lockdown, so fuel levies declining. Between those four alone, you're talking about a massive decline in government revenue of anywhere between 300 and 400 billion rand, or 20 to 30% of what was expected.
Yeah, so this is an incredible debt burden that we're taking on, because the difference has to be funded by debt. Debt for business for South Africa is talking about the risk here, because we may take on more foreign debt. So just explain that. I guess we've always had this cushion in that most of the borrowing that government does has been here at home.
Yes, most of what government has borrowed in the past has been from our large financial institutions that are very well developed by international standards. Your likes of 91, Coronation, Old Mutual, Sanlam, Liberty, Stanlib, and that sort of thing. And the nice thing about that is if you borrow the money in rands and the rand collapses, it doesn't matter, that debt is still in rands. The problem is the moment you start borrowing the money in dollars and the rand collapses, suddenly the debt that you have to repay eventually is far, far bigger than you originally imagined. And we are fortunate in South Africa because most of our debt.
Yeah, Dr. Jamminne, are people hearing the finance minister's warnings that we could be facing a sovereign debt crisis?
Unfortunately, I think a lot of us economists are heeding his warnings and talking about the need for structural reform and the need to stop spending huge amounts of money in bailing out state-owned enterprises and rather trying to get private partnerships involved to try and share the burden. But many within the ruling party don't want to know about that for ideological reasons. And they say we need to embark upon other ways of solving this problem, like the Reserve Bank buying the bonds that government issues and printing the money to do so, without appreciating that is that would lead to a very rapid path towards hyperinflation, where people would start needing to take huge buckets of rands to buy a loaf of bread eventually.
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, tell me about two things. The wage bill, that was already a thorny issue in the February budget. What do you expect there? And then obviously in the supplementary budget, he can't announce higher taxes, but will he signal that taxes will go up next February?
He could go for more taxes, and there's been a lot of talk, and I think if he does go for more taxes, it will be attempts at trying to tax wealth rather than income, because income taxes are already so very high. I don't know. It's possible that he could announce something, not even wait until next February. He could announce something even on Wednesday. But people are doubtful of that because tax rates are already so high that the feeling is that to do so would be counterproductive. It would chase money away more than anything. In terms of the wage bill, that is one of the big challenges. Mboweni has been trying to restrict that, but public sector unions are opposed to it, very much like the taxi industry is now trying to call on government to spend more money to help them out. People are struggling, and they want a bit of as much as they can get out of it, but government just doesn't have the money anymore to do so. Now, with this wage bill, the interesting thing is that government got involved in a 3-year wage agreement back in 2018, and this year from April to next March is the final year of that 3-year wage agreement. And government is basically wanting to renege on that agreement, which says that it has to pay salary increases of CPI inflation plus 1% to 2%. And the unions are trying to insist that they get that money, and they're quite right. That was the agreement. Government says it can't afford to.
Yeah, that is one of the funny issues, and we'll see how he deals with it this week. One of the things to watch, besides the general impossibility of this task that the finance minister has to allocate spending for health, for welfare, for all the new needs with so little money coming in. Thank you very much, Dr. Azar Jamminne. Let's now take a closer look at some of the expectations around this week's supplementary budget.